It's great to see that you seem to agree that you don't know who's going to win, right? So
Don't even know who's going to play.
let me be a bit even more provocative. You talked about the device becoming the center, right? And you walk out with your device only. Artificial intelligence, which is one of the disruptors coming. Some people believe that your voice is going to become your command and you don't need a device anymore. A couple of weeks ago, I was listening John Donovan from AT&T talk about quantum networking, where you go from speed of light in communication to speed of thought, and you create this way of communicating where you don't need a device anymore. What do you see those disruptors, and what will they do to, I guess, wireless as we know it today?
You know, it's hard to know where we're going to be 5 years from now. We, as a group, are yesterday. You know, we grew up without wireless, and then we had wireless, and it's changed our lives. But our children were born into a wireless world. They don't know what it's like without wireless. I remember in the 1990s, my kids were 10 years old or whatever, and I was still doing what I was doing, what I'm doing today. So just like today, all the companies would send me their phones, and I could test their networks, and I could try them out. So I had tons of phones. That was before everybody had phones. So my kids carried phones. They thought they were the biggest shots in the world. But they didn't have anybody to call, because nobody else had a phone. Okay, but today, everybody has a phone. Kids have phones. And today, kids, do they sign up when they're 30 years old and move into their own place? Do they sign up for Comcast cable TV? No. They get broadband, and they get Hulu or whatever they get to download the television shows that they want to watch, and they pay less. So the industry that's a traditional industry that we all grew up with, that we all feel comfortable with, that we think is the world that we all understand, is not going to be here the way it is today, 10 years from now. It's completely different from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you wanted to make a phone call, you had to use Bell South. If you wanted to make a wireless phone call, you would have one of a few smaller players. Remember AirTouch? Remember some of these little smaller players that nobody ever heard of before? But today, you have all of these new companies offering all of these new services, and tomorrow, what are we going to do? AI is going to rule the world, for better or for worse. Is it going to be totally idealistic and wonderful and make our lives perfect? Or is it going to be the opposite? Is it going to be hell on wheels? Is it going to be taking over our lives? And is it going to be making things terrible? It's probably somewhere in the middle. Some companies will be great, some companies will be terrible. Some services will be great, some services will be terrible. IoT, Internet of Things, IoT 2. You've got all of these different technologies that link companies. So when you think about what you want to do, you'll be able to think, because you're not necessarily going to have a smartphone that you're going to be using. Maybe it'll be implanted. Maybe it'll be implanted in your hand or under your ear. You're going to be able to maybe think what you want, because that's what Apple is moving toward, and Android is moving toward. So these simple devices that we used to call phones are transforming our lives, and we don't really understand it because we're the old folks. The kids are the ones who are reinventing everything, and that's the exciting part. That's where fortunes are going to be made and lost. But that's the job that we have. Is just you have to find the wave that's growing, and you've got to work for that company. You've got to invest in that company. You've got to make customers in that company, because every company and every technology is either growing, or they've rested, or they're falling. So you've got to find the companies that are growing, and there'll be different companies every few years.
Just to piggyback on that, I think maybe the people that should be on this panel are kids like my 13-year-old son. And And what's interesting, and Jeff brought up a good point, is, you know, he thinks about his iPhone. He's got an iPhone, and he thinks like, why do I have to turn off Wi-Fi? It should automatically know I want Wi-Fi off. Stuff like that, and the AI about that, knowing and predictive behavior. You know, AI predictive behavior, I think is going to, as you integrate that into wireless, is going to be very key. That said, I agree that the demographic trends are really going to drive that. But then let's also think about some of the other demographic trends. And I like to think of different industries and applying something learned in one industry to another. For example, we have Ring. I love Ring. It's a great thing. I can watch it on my phone and see who's at my door. As you know, not to say that any of us on this panel would ever age, but you know, ever. You know, I also have a father-in-law who's elderly, and I'm just saying, well, wouldn't it be neat if we put something equivalent to that in his house so that my wife can or I can, you know, see if something's wrong, you know, and apply that to the aging demographics. I'm just thinking out loud, but these type of things, taking a technology used in one way, using wireless and, to your point, artificial intelligence, machine learning, we can go on those type of tangents, predictive analytics, and how do you apply that to something else? And then it's that aha moment. And those companies are really going to make it. I can't predict who they are, but it's really neat. I'll tell you this too, and to some of the points about infrastructure. People want to. I agree with Jeff that it might be focused on that phone. Someone's got to develop that app to put on the phone, number one. Number two is you still got to make all that stuff, and I hate to say it, as much as it's wireless, it's in the ground, getting to the towers, all that stuff behind the scenes. What's going to be innovative and creative in that space that will allow the wireless industry to grow? I'll give you one example. Going back into the mid-1990s and late 1990s and early 2000s, there was a lot of technology with wireless and towers where it could, based upon the signals coming to and from the tower, it could read the coverage to a certain area. Think about that. If you can take that same concept and with 5G, other technologies, and wireless, and it can literally say, okay, there is obviously a lot of demand for something over here. Let's shift wirelessly that emphasis over here. That is artificial intelligence, machine learning, and predictive analytics all tied up into one. And if you can reduce the amount of infrastructure required by the carriers to do that, that is key. Now, can it be done? That's for people a lot smarter than me to figure out.
A couple of points just to add on. We've been thinking a lot about the future and how people consume, and we talked about the next generation. Well, this generation kind of looks, or the prior generation kind of looks like the generation before it. Right? They have houses, they have 2.x number of children, they have televisions in the central home of the house, they have all, they kind of consume communications in similar ways that people did before. But when you look at which has come to much larger broadband speeds in the home, which has come to much bigger televisions, and so bigger is better. Well, now look at kind of the world in front of us, and everybody's kind of building to the fact that maybe that's going to continue to happen. And so I would argue that's kind of like, are you all familiar with the Jetsons? Right? Why in the Jetsons does he actually drive that? Right? Right? We've come so far, we're living in the clouds, but yet we have to drive the car to and from work. Right? And so if you think about how people are consuming content today, is it going to be kind of hubbed or is it going to be distributed? Right? And is it going to have to be very high resolution content, or is it going to be good enough? Right? I think as a number of you have seen in the industry, T-Mobile came out with an unlimited plan and delivered good enough video, right? And the demographic that wanted it was fine with it, right? And so I think that we need to watch out for the over-engineering in the future for solutions, because as we start to look at what the younger demographic needs, are they going to need exactly what we needed before, or are they going to need something completely different based upon how they consume content? I think wireless is critical to that, because if you're using smaller screens and consuming good enough content and doing it across a myriad of different places, the infrastructure that's required and the solutions that are required look very different than they do today. And then when we talk about AI and artificial learning and data, I'll go back to linking to some of the data points that I had before. I think, is AI going to take over the world? Maybe, but I hope it takes over the world with an emphasis on partnership with human element of it as well. Because I think we can develop the world. So I was with Michio Kagan, who's a futurist, and was watching a video that he created, and he went, and there was a scene where somebody woke up in the morning and went to the restroom. And then they moved over to the mirror, and the mirror gave them a diagnosis of what happened. Like, okay, well, last night you had red meat, you had a couple glasses of wine, you shouldn't have done that, this, that, and right? And I said, well, I think interesting. I think the majority of us would turn that off and go about our day. Right? So I think we have to find a way for technology and the information that technology and the opportunities that it provides to interact with the fact that most people would prefer, an aspirin to a vitamin. So the system needs to work all together.
That's a very good one. I remember someone once in London saying that the day that my phone tells me how much I should drink, I dunk it in a pint of beer. So. But we've heard a lot about, I guess, the Internet of Things. It's one of the hot topics. I used to lead the GSMA's program for that a few years back. And I still remember 5 years ago at the Mobile World Congress, seeing China Mobile's president talk about connected sheep, and everyone thinking he was crazy. And I remember predictions from Ericsson of 50 billion devices by 2020. Oh, we're almost there. I don't know if we have 50 billion. I think we're far from it. But it's no doubt that it's getting there, and IoT is becoming quite important. Now, the connectivity is just a small step, right, to get the device connected. And sometimes it's actually quite expensive to do that. So if you don't have a use case that is a killer use case that you can monetize, there's no point in having a picture frame that is connected or whatever is connected if you can't actually compensate for the cost of embedding connectivity into it. So for next year, what is the killer use case or the killer industry that you think will actually get there?
I'll take one shot at this. One that I've seen that's really kind of cool is, think about a retail environment, and this, maybe on the lower end of IoT, but these are passive RFID chips. And what you can literally do is, as a retailer or Amazon or someone online, if you decide that this $29.95 price tag is wrong, you can flash it, wirelessly at the retail location. We're reducing it to $24.95, and then there's a price tag, and yes, it says small, medium, large, but embedded in that will be technology that when it runs through the counter at the point of sale counter, it knows that that retail at one location has marked it down from $29.95 to $25 or whatever. But it might be in another city that's the hot item. So maybe it keeps the price. So the ability to do some of that stuff pricing-wise and doing it on the fly with, I'll call it passive RFID. There's a lot of different technologies on that one. It's the Bluetooth, it's the Wi-Fi that all enables someone to figure out, and by the way, predictive analytics behind the scenes that says, hey, this is really moving really well in Seattle, but it's not moving so well in Atlanta. Maybe you ought to either move it up there or reduce the price, because the cost of doing business in retail is critical right now. And candidly, it's sometimes cheaper for the retailer to just go ahead and move it than let it go out there. I'm going to give you another example. There are a lot of online retailers where it's not uncommon, and I've seen my daughters do this too. Order 5 items. I like all 5 of these and return 4. So say, for example, you had the special where you buy 4 items and you get a 5th free. Well, my daughter, I'll put my daughter on the spot, buys all 5, got that 5th one for free, now returns 4. How do you deal with that as a retailer? And these are things that retailers are struggling with, and wireless can be a part of that solution. I'm not saying it's the only part of the solution, but the intelligence behind that will, in my opinion, make or break certain retailers. And I'm thinking the apparel industry in this one particular example, but you could apply it to many, many different industries.
There's the grocery industry. Think about walking into a grocery store. I mean, for years, I've been thinking all you have to do is walk in with a cart. The cart should have bags. You find everything off the shelf, put it into the bag, and you walk through scanners on the way out to your car. Why do you have to fill up your cart, take everything out of the cart, put it on the cashier, and then put everything into bags, and then put it back into your cart just so you can walk out of the store? That's insane, but that's the way we've done it for a million years. Today we have technology that will let us do things. Amazon.com with their few retail stores are testing that kind of technology, letting customers just walk in, pick up a candy bar off the shelf, and walk out. So there's innovations that go on that transform industries. We've seen some of it in the retail industry. Think about Kroger, think about Publix, think about the grocery store industry. If you walk in to Kroger or Publix, you have a brand relationship with these companies. But now all of a sudden they have these automated checkout lines, so you don't have to use a cashier. But these automated checkout lines are different depending upon the store that you use. So if you walk into a Kroger, you can scan everything, put it in your bag, then you have to swipe the card and push the button, but you can do it in whatever order you want. They'll let you do it in whatever order you want. You just pay it and you leave. If you go to Publix, they're snooty. Publix makes you do things in exactly the right order. If you don't hit the right button, if you don't do it in exactly the right order, it puts a dunce cap on you and says, no, do it again. All right, makes you feel so angry at the brand that you've got a good relationship with. So it ruins, my opinion is they're hurting themselves. But these are the leaders in the industry. What about the newcomers? Sprouts. What about Trader Joe's? Walk into those stores and you can pay with your iPhone. You can't pay with your iPhone or Android if you're at Kroger or if you're at Publix, but you can at Trader Joe's and Sprouts. And you don't even have to touch that dirty keypad. Why is it that if the little stores can do it, the big stores can't? So that's why Amazon.com buying Whole Foods is going to transform that whole industry. And will the leaders stay the leaders? Or will there be a transformation in the next few years in the grocery industry? And if it's the grocery industry, it's also every other retail industry. And it's also every other industry. So it's all transforming. We're just in the middle of this big wave of transformation.
Very good. Let's give some time for our audience to make questions. Anyone wants to be first?
So I've heard a lot about infrastructure, hard things, etc. Right? On the other side, you're going software, hard. AT&T's going software for a lot of things. You've got Amazon, it's basically a software company, right? Can you comment on that a little bit and give your thoughts around that?
So I guess we have the impact of the software in the hard.
Well,
Can we repeat the question so everybody can hear, please? Okay.
So the question is, what's the impact of software in the wireless industry, given that you have so many new services that are software-based coming to be successful?
I was going to say, I think, and if it's infrastructure is a broad term, but I do think, to your point, it's software that will drive that. For example, let's take the case of fiber. It used to be you have to put 2 different things on each end of, 2 different pieces of hardware on each side of this, the fiber, and replace them every time you got into new technology. The new software infrastructure allows those updates via software, often wirelessly or via the fiber. So yes, I still think it's a system. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I used to be a wireless analyst, and there was a wireline telecom analyst. That's, it's bygone. Now it used to be a software analyst. I did billing systems too, and all the public companies that did that. Software is integrated into hardware. Hardware is going to be integral to how software performs. I agree with you, it's going to be very important that it's all one big system, and making them all work together and work securely without causing data breaches, without causing loss of private information. That's where software can really come into play. All those have an impact, I'm sure, for other companies.
Any other question?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned cybersecurity earlier. So as this moves forward, do we blame the millennials for the ability to take anything and everything, all their information? And so how do we address that going forward?
Yes.
So I'm just going to repeat the question for your video watchers as well, and then for everyone else. The question is about cybersecurity, and if we blame the millennials from putting the information out there. I think I heard it correctly, right? So how do we address that I guess, less privacy desire from the millennials?
So I'm not sure. It's anyway. So cybersecurity, and I think we do blame the open information and the fact that people have been willing to give their information in order to get products and services back. Right? I think that going forward, as data becomes even more of a commodity, that's going to be even more important. Right? And you're starting to see in Europe solutions to regulate that and to put the control back into people for owning their own information and being able to understand how that's used across the broader ecosystem. I think as you look at technologies like blockchain and others, those go a real far way into being able to act as the infrastructure that will allow traceability and accountability for the use of whether it be content rights or whether it be personal information. Right? So I think you'll see a transformation. I don't know, 7 years ago, we had many solutions that we were proposing around how to make more secure information and gave people more ownership around that information, but it still hasn't come to front yet, right? Like there hasn't been a huge tipping point that has said we have to do this. Right now, I don't believe government is only going to lead this. I think there's got to be even more of a tipping point to push people over the edge on that, and I hope it doesn't become too bad of a tipping point, but I see it, coming potentially.
Yeah, cybersecurity is going to be a problem going forward. That's one of the big black holes that we have to deal with, and that we're going to have to deal with. But there's a lot of black holes that we have to deal with in this industry. I mean, who really wants to be in a self-driving car? When it's hitting in a highway in rush hour traffic, going toward a curve in the road, or having a bus coming straight at you and you're not steering. I mean, maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, the technology will be there, but I'm not going to be the one doing it. Although I did drive a self-driving car in Las Vegas at CES last year, and it is cool, but it was on a very controlled circuit. We have to make sure that we have the control on every road, on every corner, on every street, in every car, and then when the time comes that there's an accident that's going to happen, you have to decide. Right now, we decide who we're going to hit. Are we going to hit the car in front of us, or are we going to turn to the right and hit the people on the sidewalk? Well, the problem is, if you're in a self-driving car, you don't even make that decision. That gets programmed in. Who programs that in? Who makes that decision? Because somebody's going to die. This is not just a game. So how do you decide who you're going to kill? These are questions that we don't have answers to.
That's the next big use case.
I think we can get answers to that.
That's a killer use case. Here's my big question on autonomous driving is, next time you go out on the road, look at how many 20-year-old cars there are out there now.
Yeah.
The autonomous cars, they'll be great if they're all autonomous and they all know how the other's going to react. But let's face it, there's some 17, 18-year-olds, yes, my daughter too, out there, and you don't know how they're going to react. How are you going to get all those non-autonomous cars off the road? Who's going to pay for that? That's what, I don't know what the autonomous driving thing. Sorry.
So it's going to be a messy next few decades.
Yes.
We have a question
Yeah,
here.
back to your question about cybersecurity, IoT technology. This is never ending. I would say this one is trade-off relationship. How convenient, convenience, technology, privacy. That's why I said never ending. What about how much you give up and your technology, privacy or convenience?
Well, that's true. I mean, when you give up,
I'm going to repeat the question. So partner, you
when you give up privacy
privacy
or
or
convenience,
convenience, privacy
when
and
you have this
convenience.
new technology that allows you to do all these wonderful things that make your toes tingle and get you all excited, but all of a sudden, everybody in the world also knows what you're doing because you're tied in with everybody else. There's no more privacy anymore. If you think you have privacy just because you're not turning on your cell phone or something, forget it. Everybody knows everything that you're doing every minute of the day. There's cameras, there's sensors, there's everything. All the stuff that makes AI work and IoT work and all these amazing technologies that just make us so excited to talk about and read about are also taking away every bit of privacy. I care that I no longer have privacy. My kids don't care. So that's the difference. We're going to be writing about this and talking about this and complaining about this until there's not going to be people who are writing about it, talking about it, until the kids grow up.
That's another killer.
Killer app.
Question here.
Great presentation so far. And I have a quick couple of questions about the 21st century infrastructure. From what I understand so far, many public-private partnerships can't get off the ground now. And you add in the complexity of the cyber infrastructure. And if you look at most states or cities, they don't really control their own spectrum. So, and then when you look at 5G and their infrastructure, that has to be physically upgraded for latency and so on and so forth. So I can't really see, maybe it's something I'm missing about the rollout.
So the question is how do you get the rollout of infrastructure given that public-private partnerships are not working and who's going to fund it?
Well, it's just more of a historical context. Like, because I'm young, I don't really do.
We need a question for the audience.
It's more of a historical context, given the variables that I've suggested.
Well,
How will it be rolling out?
There's a lot of different, questions in that thought. I'm just going to go with one of them. If you look at, who owns the spectrum, if you look at the wireless companies, 10 years ago, spectrum wasn't a problem, wasn't an issue because nobody used it. 10 years ago, before the iPhone and the Android, and before IoT and AI, and before all that kind of stuff, who cared about wireless data? But now wireless data, everybody cares about it. Everybody uses it. So who has wireless data spectrum? Everybody is wanting more wireless data spectrum because it's a limited quantity. Sprint, the weakest of all the big four companies, has the most wireless data spectrum. So is Sprint going to become one of these companies? Remember Light Squared, that company from 5 years ago? That was I can't remember the guy, Falcone. He had the idea to solve the wireless spectrum problem. The problem is the spectrum that he had, that he was going to be selling to other wireless carriers, had a conflict with another industry, and he would basically just ask to leave the industry. Right. So we've known about this problem for years, but since then we've squeezed more usage out of this limited spectrum that we have through compression technologies and all these different magical ways of getting more from the limited technology we have. I don't know if we're going to have enough 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because we don't have unlimited amounts. But we're going to continue to compress, and we're going to continue to use it better than we could. I don't have an answer to your question, but this is something that we have to wrestle with, because every carrier needs spectrum, wireless data spectrum going forward, and they just don't have enough.
Well, I think to get to your question, to give you some historical context, it's interesting. There are certain technologies in wireless spectrum, and I'll use a licensed and an unlicensed example. MMDS, which was a spectrum block that was given to educational institutions. They didn't know what to do with it, and then they didn't have the funding to do some of the things they wanted to do with it. What ended up happening with it? A bunch of different companies that you won't recognize, but to Jeff's point, a lot of it ended up in Sprint's hands through WorldCom bankruptcy, through Nucentrix, a couple others. I was in a limited way involved with that when that was consolidating. We were going to do a wireless internet play. It didn't really work because this guy named Craig McCaw came along and bought a model home Spectrum that we wanted to buy, something called Eagle River, and that eventually went in concert with some other folks. That said, give you another example, 802.11. Probably people don't even recognize that. That's what we call Wi-Fi. Okay? When the early days of 802.11, before G, and that 802.11G, and it became Wi-Fi, there was a lot of talk about all these public-private combinations. Boingo, which is a public company, there were a bunch of them here in Atlanta, smaller companies were trying to do exactly what you're talking about. And they'd go to, and I'm not going to pick on the city of Atlanta, but they went to cities such as Atlanta, and they said, oh, we'll have to study that. And these are companies that got funding based upon business plans that had to be up and running quickly. And that's the problem. To your point, I think the public-private partnership, the problem is that the public entities don't have the resources to move at the speed that the private companies need to move at to satisfy their investors. And that's, I think that's always going to be a problem.
We have another question
Last
here
question,
in the
that's the
back.
last question for tonight.
So the question is, what are your thoughts on GDPR and the regulation on privacy that the European Union passed, and what's the impact for American companies?
Are we thinking backwards or are we thinking forwards?
Forward.
You know, we've been talking about it before. Privacy and it's just gone. You know,
I can talk about it if you want.
sure.
And I mean, I guess one point that I would put, and then I'll hand it over, is that software companies and digital companies, by their very nature, are global, right? And so I think that as you look across the landscape of those who are successful, all of them have a global platform that they're able to utilize, right? And so when there are restrictions and regulations in one area, in order to be a truly global company, you have to really look and adapt, right? And so I think that's going to give pause for concern for a number of companies. And then you look at where data resides and how people get access to that, and it becomes an even bigger issue, right? So if something's sitting in Ireland, can we use it in the United States in cases? So I think all of that is going to become the forefront, and everybody will have to deal with it, that's for sure.
Last question here.
Last question.
What companies are you investing in for the future?
What companies are you investing in for the future?
Believe it or not, I don't invest in companies in the industry that I follow because I read about them and talk about them all the time. So I'm not going to ask.
I'll generically describe a company I've got a private investment in. It's a company for headline bidding, which is, you own a website and that bid, you have the right to bid for that spot on that website. The data analytics behind that is going to be super high because Coca-Cola wants to know if they're going to spend $2 per CPM, are they really getting the demographic they want to get? They might be willing to pay $3 if they're getting the right demographics versus someone else. They'll say, well, you don't have the demographics, you want to pay $1 per CPM. And do that, oh, by the way, you change that every 5 or 10 minutes.
Great.
I'm going to give a boring answer because we have an audit practice. So my OGC would come down on me pretty hard.
So security, okay.
Yeah.
You
The compliance department.
have to decide, you have to look look at the groups of companies and decide who's going to be a leader and who's going to be a follower going forward. You know, just look at, I'm going to give you two examples. You've got AT&T and you've got Verizon. Okay, these are two companies that are identical companies. They used to be identical companies, but they're not anymore. AT&T is growing in all these different areas, and Verizon is still a very powerful wireless player, but they're not really interested in being a wireline player.
You mentioned all your children. What are they doing?
I'll have to ask them.
Very good.
I haven't talked.
I think there's a lot of food for thought, and I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but thank you so much for coming. I don't know if
Yeah, folks, that was a great session. Thanks, Anna, Jeff, Barry, and Greg. Please join me in thanking him again. You folks realize everything is recorded. So if we do invite you back in, the Wireless Technology Forum does score.
So how did it do last time?
That's the other thing. I didn't cover that when we had the prep call. But one more thing, you mentioned about 802.11. When we started 14 years ago, that's some of the stuff that we talked about. But we don't talk about that. We talk about businesses, transformations, and how things are changing. Now, to close out the event and the year, I'm going to invite both Caroline Dunn and Ratan to come up here. So thank you again.
Thank you all so much for coming to our last event. We'll see you in January right here at the Wireless Technology Forum at Atlanta Tech Village. And I'm going to turn this over to our new president, Ratan, and please say a few words.
This was the official handing over the baton that you just saw. Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you. I want to thank Caroline for everything that she has been doing and will continue to do during the year. We're going to continue to be here, and I really appreciate everybody coming. And we look forward to seeing you in January and throughout the year over here in Atlanta Tech Village. One of the things that we're going to do and do more of, and Caroline's been doing this, she's been sitting in the back, and we're doing this live over Facebook. We've got a hashtag, we'll establish a hashtag throughout the year, and would really like to get you all to participate more, even before the event, during the event, ask your questions during the event, because we want to get into what everybody is using and what technologies we have available. So we'll do more of that. And after the event too, you will see after this event, and she's already got pictures up on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And so please continue to use the hashtags. We might even establish one standard hashtag or whatever. But I want to thank the panelists. Thank you so much for coming, and I wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving and happy holidays. And we'll see you here in January. Thank you again.